Most people go through life thinking they know who they are. They know their name, their job, their hobbies, their favorite color, or food. But Carl Jung believed that what most people call the self is only a fraction of who they truly are. It's the surface, a mask, an idea they've built and accepted. Beneath that mask, however, lies something deeper, something older, something mysterious. And that hidden part of you is trying to speak. Every night when you dream, that part of you speaks in symbols, not in words, not in logic, but in metaphors. Strange stories, emotions that don't make sense, dreams of falling, of flying, of being chased, of rooms you've never seen, faces you don't recognize, situations that feel real and yet impossible. These aren't random. Jung believed these are messages. Messages from your unconscious mind, the part of you that remembers things your ego has forgotten. This is the foundation of Jung's book, Man and His Symbols. It was his last major work, and he wrote it not for academics, but for everyday people. People like you and me. People who feel lost. People who sense there's something more to life, something more to themselves, but can't quite reach it. This book was his gift to the world. A guidebook for returning to the self. Jung believed that the unconscious is not some dark corner filled with repressed memories and trauma. It's much more than that. It is intelligent. It is creative. It is symbolic. And it holds the parts of yourself that you've ignored, abandoned, or buried. The unconscious speaks in images, in archetypes, in stories that seem ancient and yet deeply personal. Think of a dream you've had recently. Maybe it didn't make sense. Maybe it made you uncomfortable. Jung would say that dream wasn't meaningless. It was a message, a signal, a conversation. The problem is, most of us have forgotten how to listen. We wake up, brush it off, and return to the surface world. But something inside us keeps trying. It keeps repeating the symbol. It keeps knocking. Let's say you dream of a house. You're walking through it, and you discover a new room you've never seen before. It's dusty, hidden, and full of old things. That's not just a dream. That's your psyche showing you a part of yourself that has been forgotten. That room represents potential, memories, desires, fears, something meaningful that you've locked away. The same goes for other common dream symbols. Water often represents emotion. Fire can symbolize transformation. Animals can represent instincts. A staircase may symbolize personal growth or inner descent. These are not fixed meanings. They shift depending on your life, your context, your personal story. But they always mean something. Jung called these universal images archetypes. They're symbols that live deep inside all human beings, no matter where they come from. These archetypes appear in myths, religions, dreams, fairy tales, and stories across every culture. The wise old man, the trickster, the mother, the shadow, the hero's journey. You've seen them in books, movies, art, but more importantly, you've seen them in your own dreams. Why do these same patterns keep repeating? Because they're part of you. And when you dream, you're not just entertaining random images. You're experiencing ancient truths through the lens of your own soul. But here's the tragedy. Modern people have been trained to ignore this world. We're told to be logical, practical, rational. Imaginative thinking is called childish. Emotional depth is labeled as weakness. And so we abandon that inner voice. We reject dreams. We dismiss symbols. We rely on surface thinking. And we lose connection to something vital. This is why so many people feel empty, disconnected, successful on the outside, but confused within. They've become strangers to their own soul. Jung believed that healing begins the moment you start paying attention to your symbols again, when you stop treating your dreams as nonsense and start seeing them as guidance. Man and his symbols begins with this powerful idea. Your unconscious is not your enemy. It is your neglected ally. It is the side of you that knows what you truly need, even when your conscious mind has forgotten. But it will not speak to you in plain language. It will speak in dreams, in images, in sudden emotions, in symbols that repeat in your life until you notice them. And once you begin to notice, everything changes. You stop living in reaction. You stop chasing meaning in places that can't give it to you. You start listening, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet of your own inner world. And that world has been waiting for you. Jung said that every human being has a path toward wholeness. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be. And the way to begin that process is by reconnecting with the unconscious, by seeing your dreams not as accidents, but as messages. This first part of the book doesn't offer easy answers. It offers a mirror that shows you the parts of yourself you've avoided. And if you have the courage to look, what you'll find is not darkness, but truth, depth, and meaning. Carl Jung believed that every dream is a message from the unconscious, not a puzzle to be solved by logic, but a communication to be understood with feeling, patience, and symbolic awareness. Most people shrug off their dreams as random images, chaotic stories that mean nothing. But Jung insisted, your dreams are more honest than your waking mind. In Man and His Symbols, Jung shares a powerful truth. Dreams reflect not what you think, but what you are. When you are confused, stressed, or emotionally blocked, your dreams don't lie to you. They don't sugarcoat. They show you exactly what you've been avoiding. The unconscious doesn't care about politeness or appearances. It shows you what you need to see. Take, for example, a man who keeps dreaming of being trapped in a narrow hallway. No doors, no windows, just walking endlessly. In waking life, he feels fine, busy with work, smiling at meetings, keeping up with family. But inside, something feels stuck. The hallway dream keeps returning. Jung would ask, what are you not allowing yourself to feel? Where in your life have you closed all of the doors? The hallway isn't literal. It's emotional. It's symbolic. The narrow path represents how this man has boxed himself in, living the same pattern, making the same choices, afraid to break out of routine. The unconscious doesn't argue with logic. It simply shows, repeats, echoes. Over time, if we ignore these messages, the symbols become more intense. The dreams grow darker. The emotions rise. Anxiety, depression, emptiness. The soul doesn't vanish, it just gets louder. Jung believed that healing begins when you stop running from these symbols, when you stop fearing the messages and begin listening to them like you would a wise but frustrated friend. What are you trying to tell me? Is a more powerful question than, what does this dream mean? In the book, Jung describes a case of a woman who kept dreaming about drowning in a large body of water. At first, she thought it meant stress, but after several conversations, it became clear. She was drowning in a relationship that no longer served her. She had built her life around someone else's expectations. She wasn't allowed to express anger or independence. The water was not just water. It was suppressed emotion, a deep part of herself that she was afraid to feel. As she began confronting that truth, first in therapy, then in life, her dreams shifted. The drowning stopped. The water became a calm lake. She began swimming, floating. Eventually, she dreamed of walking across a peaceful shoreline. Her unconscious had not changed its language. She had simply begun to understand it. This is the power of symbols. They evolve as you evolve. They aren't fixed signs with universal meaning. Jung warned against trying to decode symbols like a dictionary. Instead, he urged people to engage with them personally. Your symbol is your story. Your dream carries your meaning. Another patient Jung described had a recurring dream of a snake. At first, he was terrified. But over time, he began to see the snake not as a threat, but as a signal of transformation. In mythology, snakes often represent rebirth, shedding skin, renewal. Once he accepted the fear, he understood that the snake was not trying to attack him. It was showing him a part of himself that was ready to grow. Our conscious minds often see things in black and white, good or bad, positive or negative. But the unconscious deals in paradox. A fire can destroy, but it can also purify. A monster can be terrifying, but it might also protect something sacred. A symbol is rarely what it first appears to be. This is why Jung encouraged people to draw their dreams, to write them down, to sit with them, to feel them, rather than explain them away. Your first reaction to a symbol is rarely its full truth. Sometimes the thing that scares you most in a dream is the part of yourself you need to reclaim. Many of us were taught to ignore emotions, to hide sadness, suppress anger, laugh off fear. Over time, these emotions don't disappear. They go underground, into the unconscious, and they wait. They appear in your dreams, not to haunt you, but to invite you, to remind you that you're still human, still whole, still capable of change. One of Jung's most important lessons is that the unconscious always tries to balance the conscious. If you are too rational, it sends you emotions. If you are too controlling, it shows you chaos. If you ignore your desires, it sends you fantasies. If you're afraid of your shadow, dream of being chased. Not to punish you, but to pull you back into balance. This idea is central to man and his symbols. You are not meant to live in one extreme. Not fully ego, not fully unconscious, but whole. Integrate. You are a bridge between your outer world and your inner world, and symbols are the road that connects them. So how do you begin working with your dreams? Jung's advice was simple. Start recording them. Don't analyze right away. Just collect. Write them down when you wake up, even if they don't make sense. Over time, you'll see patterns, recurring images, emotions that echo across different stories. That's when you start to see the symbolic language forming. Don't search for correct meanings. Instead, ask yourself, what does this symbol feel like to me? What does it remind me of? What emotion rises when I see it again? Then, connect it to your life. What are you going through right now? What have you avoided? What truth are you not ready to admit? Symbols don't lie. They just speak in a language the modern world has forgotten. Jung believed that once you begin to understand this language, your life becomes richer, more meaningful, less mechanical. You stop following patterns blindly. You stop fearing change, because you understand that every symbol, every dream, every strange image that rises from the unconscious is not there to confuse you. It's there to guide you. Carl Jung believed that inside every human being lives a collection of ancient blueprints, psychological patterns older than your name, your memories, or your personality. He called them archetypes. These are not characters in a book or traits in a test. They are emotional structures, inner figures, voices, forces, and they appear again and again in your dreams, your fantasies, and your reactions to life. Think about it. Why do so many people across different cultures tell the same kinds of stories? The hero who leaves home, faces a monster, and returns transformed. The wise old man who gives guidance. The dark figure in the forest who tempts or threatens. The nurturing mother. The playful child. The trickster. The lover. The king. The shadow. These are not just cultural ideas. They are psychological realities. They are parts of you. In Man and His Symbols, Jung explains that archetypes are inherited patterns of thought and behavior that live in the collective unconscious. That means they're not just personal to you. They're shared by all humans. They emerge in myths, religions, dreams, and everyday situations because they're part of the human condition. You don't invent them. You recognize them. For example, when a child looks up to a teacher or grandparent and sees wisdom, that's the wise old man archetype. When you feel guided by your intuition, your inner voice, that might be the inner sage. When someone betrays your trust and you feel an ancient kind of pain, the shadow archetype may have been triggered. These archetypes aren't fixed roles. They shift. They evolve. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they hurt. The shadow, for instance, represents the parts of yourself that you deny or suppress. It can show up in dreams as a dark figure, a monster, a stranger following you. But it's not evil. It's a mirror. The shadow wants to be seen. It wants to be integrated. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, true growth doesn't come from avoiding what's uncomfortable. It comes from turning toward it. The shadow is painful because it's personal. It holds your repressed anger, your hidden desires, your unresolved fears. But confronting it is the first step toward wholeness. In dreams, the shadow often appears as someone of the same sex, an aggressive man, a cruel woman, a version of yourself you try to avoid. These figures are symbolic. They are not predicting danger. They are revealing what you're not willing to face. Then there's the Anima and Animus. These are the inner opposite gender energies that Jung believed exist in everyone. For men, the Anima represents the inner feminine, emotion, sensitivity, receptivity. For women, the Animus represents the inner masculine, logic, strength, will. These are not about gender roles. They are about psychological balance. Many of our emotional struggles come from rejecting these parts. A man taught never to cry may repress his anima and become emotionally cold. A woman taught never to express anger may repress her animus and lose her sense of agency. These imbalances create inner tension, and often the unconscious tries to restore the balance through dreams, projections, and fantasies. You might dream of a mysterious woman leading you somewhere, or a powerful man blocking your path. These are not just characters. They are aspects of your own psyche. They are you, trying to show you what you've lost, what you need to reclaim. The goal of life was not perfection, but individuation. That means becoming a whole person, not by being flawless, but by accepting and integrating every part of yourself. And archetypes are the signposts on that path. They show you what's missing. They reveal what's hidden. In modern life, we often live disconnected from these inner figures. We try to be consistent, logical, productive, but when we cut off the inner child, the wise elder, the shadow, the lover, we lose the richness of our emotional world. We become flat, anxious, lost. Have you ever overreacted to something small? Maybe someone criticizes you, and you feel rage, or someone leaves you on red, and you spiral into insecurity. That's not about the situation. That's an archetype being activated, a wound you haven't healed, a part of you that's still waiting to be acknowledged. In Man and His Symbols, Jung shares many dream examples where archetypes revealed emotional truths. One man kept dreaming of being judged by a court of animals. It turned out he had suppressed his instincts for years, living only through reason. The dream wasn't absurd. It was a symbolic trial, his wild self demanding recognition. Another woman dreamed of a crumbling cathedral. At first, she didn't understand it, but after exploring it with Jung, she realized she had lost her spiritual connection. She had been so focused on external achievement that her inner world had begun to collapse. The dream wasn't just a warning. It was a call to rebuild. Archetypes don't force you. They invite you. They nudge you with images, with emotions, with dreams that don't make sense until you slow down and feel into them. And once you recognize them, you begin to see them everywhere. In your relationships, your reactions, your creative urges, your fears. Jung often said that when you ignore an archetype, it doesn't disappear. It takes over. If you ignore your inner child, you may become overly serious, rigid, and depressed. If you suppress the shadow, you may become judgmental and secretly envious. But when you acknowledge these figures, when you talk to them through art, writing, reflection, you create space for healing. Working with archetypes is not about controlling them. It's about listening, understanding, letting them express themselves in safe and conscious ways. It's about learning the language of your own soul. So the next time you have a dream that disturbs you, don't ask What's wrong with me? Ask, which part of me is trying to be seen? Because once you begin this journey, once you start recognizing the inner voices and figures that live within you, you realize something powerful. You are not just one self. You are a living system, a symbolic landscape, a house of many rooms, and every room deserves to be entered. When people hear the word symbol, they often think of abstract art, ancient myths, or something reserved for dreams and fantasy. But Carl Jung believed that symbols are not limited to the unconscious or to dream states. They are present in everyday life. They guide your choices, affect your emotions, and influence the way you see yourself and others, even when you're not aware of it. In Man and His Symbols, Jung explained that symbols don't just belong in books or bedtime stories. They live in your relationships, your habits, your language, your fears, and your aspirations. They appear in religion, in advertising, in movies, in art, in architecture, in your most private moments of longing or confusion. Symbols shape the meaning of your life, and the more conscious you are of them, the more control you have over your destiny. Think about a wedding ring. It's just a small circle of metal. But when you see it, you instantly feel its meaning. Commitment, unity, love, eternity. That's a symbol. It connects an object to an emotional reality. A flag is just colored fabric, yet it can evoke pride, sorrow, or rage. A tattoo, a song, a cross, a locked door, a red dress. All of these can carry symbolic weight depending on the person, the culture, or the moment. Carl Jung believed that the greatest journey in a human life is the journey toward wholeness. Not happiness, not perfection, wholeness. To be whole means to accept every part of yourself. Not just the parts you like, but also the ones you hide. The parts you're proud of, and the ones that make you uncomfortable. The calm and the chaos. The love and the fear. The light and the shadow. This journey is what Jung called individuation. It is not a goal you reach once and never think about again. It's an ongoing process, a slow and personalist path of becoming who you truly are, beyond social roles, beyond expectations, beyond masks. And it always begins with a disturbance, a tension, a sense that something in your life doesn't fit anymore. Maybe it's a job that once made sense, but now drains you. Maybe it's a relationship that feels shallow, even though it looks perfect. Maybe it's a success that feels empty. These moments of discomfort are not failures. Jung believed they are signs that your soul is asking for growth, that your unconscious is sending signals, that you are being invited into the next phase of yourself. At the center of individuation is the self, not the ego, not the identity you show the world, but the totality of who you are. The self includes both conscious and unconscious parts. It includes your past and your potential, and it expresses itself through symbols. The self might appear in your dreams as a circle, a mandala, a wise guide, or even a divine figure. It is not a character. It is a presence, a silent center. And the more you ignore it, the more lost you feel. The more you listen to it, the more meaning your life begins to hold. The process of individuation often starts with meeting your shadow, the part of yourself that holds what you have rejected. the anger you hide, the fears you pretend don't exist, the shame you carry. Most people spend their lives running from the shadow. But Jung believed that true healing begins when you turn around and face it. Facing the shadow doesn't mean acting on every dark impulse. It means recognizing where you've split yourself in half, where you've said, this part is acceptable, and this part is not. The longer the shadow is ignored, the more it controls you from behind the scenes. But once it's brought into awareness, it loses its grip. You begin to understand yourself more deeply, with more honesty, more compassion. After the shadow comes integration. That means making space in your daily life for what you've discovered. If you've always been a people pleaser, integration might mean learning to say no. If you've been hiding your creativity, it might mean painting again. If you've suppressed your emotions, it might mean crying, speaking, feeling, instead of holding it all in. The path to wholeness is not about becoming a new person. It's about becoming more yourself. The parts you've buried are not mistakes. They're the missing pieces. And when you begin to collect them, your inner world becomes more stable. You no longer react from fear. You no longer seek constant approval. You begin to feel centered, grounded. Carl Jung believed that the greatest journey in a human life is the journey toward wholeness. Not happiness, not perfection. Wholeness. To be whole means to accept every part of yourself. Not just the parts you like, but also the ones you hide. The parts you're proud of, and the ones that make you uncomfortable. The calm and the chaos. The love and the fear. The light and the shadow. This journey is what Jung called individuation. It is not a goal you reach once and never think about again. It's an ongoing process, a slow and personalist path of becoming who you truly are, beyond social roles, beyond expectations, beyond masks. And it always begins with a disturbance, a tension, a sense that something in your life doesn't fit anymore. Maybe it's a job that once made sense, but now drains you. Maybe it's a relationship that feels shallow, even though it looks perfect. Maybe it's a success that feels empty. These moments of discomfort are not failures. Jung believed they are signs that your soul is asking for growth, that your unconscious is sending signals, that you are being invited into the next phase of yourself. At the center of individuation is the self, not the ego, not the identity you show the world, but the totality of who you are. The self includes both conscious and unconscious parts. It includes your past and your potential, and it expresses itself through symbols. The self might appear in your dreams as a circle, a mandala, a wise guide, or even a divine figure. It is not a character. It is a presence, a silent center. And the more you ignore it, the more lost you feel. The more you listen to it, the more meaning your life begins to hold. The process of individuation often starts with meeting your shadow, the part of yourself that holds what you have rejected, the anger you hide, the fears you pretend don't exist, the shame you carry. Most people spend their lives running from the shadow. But Jung believed that true healing begins when you turn around and face it. Facing the shadow doesn't mean acting on every dark impulse. It means recognizing where you've split yourself in half, where you've said, "This part is acceptable, and this part is not." The longer the shadow is ignored, the more it controls you from behind the scenes. But once it's brought into awareness, it loses its grip. You begin to understand yourself more deeply, with more honesty, more compassion. After the shadow comes integration. That means making space in your daily life for what you've discovered. If you've always been a people pleaser, integration might mean learning to say no. If you've been hiding your creativity, it might mean painting again. If you've suppressed your emotions, it might mean crying, speaking, feeling, instead of holding it all in. The path to wholeness is not about becoming a new person. It's about becoming more yourself. The parts you've buried are not mistakes. They're the missing pieces. And when you begin to collect them, your inner world becomes more stable. You no longer react from fear. You no longer seek constant approval. You begin to feel centered, grounded, in alive. 1913, after breaking away from Freud, Jung began experiencing intense visions, dreams, and emotional upheaval. To many, it looked like he was losing his mind. But Jung didn't run from it. He didn't try to suppress it. He went deeper. He explored the images, painted them, wrote about them. That exploration eventually became the Red Book, his private record of an inner transformation. What Jung discovered is something most of the modern world refuses to accept. Sometimes, what looks like madness is actually the beginning of self-realization. Sometimes, when your life falls apart, when your identity collapses, when your mind feels like it's splitting in two, that's not the end. That's the beginning of finding who you truly are. In Man and His Symbols, Jung explains that the unconscious doesn't always rise, slowly or gently. Sometimes it erupts. Sometimes it floods your awareness with symbols, emotions, visions, or sensations that you can't explain. And if you have no understanding of what's happening, it can feel terrifying, like you're being pulled into something dark and bottomless. But here's the truth Jung uncovered. The unconscious doesn't try to destroy you. It tries to complete you. When you suppress too much for too long, your psyche finds another way to express it. Through dreams, through breakdowns, through overwhelming emotions. It brings up everything you've ignored, not to punish you, but to heal you, to reintegrate what you've lost. The danger isn't in going deep. The danger is going in alone, without a symbolic framework, without tools, without support. That's why Jung spent so much of his life teaching people how to work with their unconscious, not to fear it, but to enlighten with it. He believed that what we call madness is sometimes a psyche in the process of reorganizing itself. When your old identity no longer fits, your unconscious tears it apart. It sends images and emotions that challenge everything you thought you were. That collapse can feel like death. But Jung would say it's the death of the ego, not of the soul. If you cling to the old identity, the process becomes unbearable. But if you surrender to the symbolic, if you explore the dreams, if you let the images speak, something begins to shift. A new self begins to form. One that is more grounded, more honest, more complete. Let's say someone loses their job. On the surface, it's a financial problem. But internally, it can feel like a collapse of meaning. Who am I without my role? What is my worth? That person may begin to dream of being lost in a forest, or stuck in a collapsing building, or being chased by faceless figures. Those dreams are not just stress. They are symbolic representations of the ego's collapse. The forest is the unknown. The building is the identity crumbling. The faceless figures are the fears and judgments you haven't confronted. But if the person starts paying attention to these symbols, they might start dreaming of fire turning into light, or finding a hidden door, or meeting a guide. That's the shift Jung talked about. When the conscious mind listens to the unconscious instead of resisting it, a transformation begins. But it's not easy. Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. To become conscious, you must face what you've denied. You must feel what you've avoided. You must walk through the dark night of the soul. But on the other side, there's something real, not an idealized version of yourself, but a whole one." Jung didn't believe in quick fixes. He didn't promise happiness. He offered something deeper, meaning. A meaningful life doesn't avoid suffering. It integrates it. It gives it context. It sees pain as a teacher, not an enemy. The difference between madness and enlightenment is not the experience. It's how you hold it. If you get overwhelmed and believe you're broken, the descent becomes chaos. But if you step back and ask, "What is this trying to show me?" the descent becomes initiation. That's why working with symbols is so important. Symbols give shape to chaos. They allow your emotions to be expressed without being destructive. A person going through grief might paint a burning tree. Someone dealing with rage might dream of a lion they can't tame. These images are not random. They are the psyche's way of processing what words cannot. Jung called this symbolic engagement active imagination. It's a technique where you consciously interact with the figures in your dreams, the images that haunt you, the emotions that arise without reason. You might speak to a shadow in your mind, or draw the mountain that appears every night. You might write a dialogue between your ego and your fear. Dreams, the shadows, the symbols, and the storms. What happens next? Carl Jung believed that the purpose of individuation was not to escape the world, but to return to it, changed, transformed, whole. Many people think that deep inner work means retreating forever. They imagine becoming isolated, untouchable, floating in a world of abstract ideas and symbols. But Jung warned against this. He believed that the final step of the journey is reintegration, taking everything you've learned about yourself and applying it in real life. What good is self-discovery if it doesn't change how you live, how you love, how you speak, and how you serve? Individuation is not the end of your responsibilities. It's the beginning of showing up in the world as your full self, not the version shaped by fear or social pressure, but the one shaped by truth. You may still go to the same job, live in the same house, speak to the same people, but something is different now. You no longer react blindly. You no longer wear masks just to survive. You act from awareness, not habit. You speak from wholeness, not insecurity. The dreams that once disturbed you become guidance. The patterns you once repeated begin to break. The parts of yourself you once hated now have a seat at your inner table. You are no longer split inside. Jung described this return to the world as a kind of integration. In mythology, It's the hero returning home after the journey. But he doesn't return the same. He brings with him a gift, a deeper wisdom, a new perspective, a message for the tribe, the gift of having faced the unknown and survived it. In your life, this might look simple. You might start setting boundaries where you never could before. You might reconnect with creativity you thought was lost. You might leave behind people or places that no longer align with your values. Or you might stay exactly where you are, but with a whole new energy. You start to live with purpose, even in the smallest decisions. This doesn't mean your life becomes perfect. The world doesn't change just because you do. But your relationship to the world does. Challenges no longer shatter you. Criticism doesn't undo you. Loneliness doesn't consume you. Because you have a foundation now, not built on approval or image, but on self-knowledge. That's what it means to return with the self. You carry your inner world into your outer life, and that begins to shape everything. The way you relate to others becomes more honest. You see their wounds more clearly. You're less reactive, more compassionate. You recognize their projections and your own. You begin to see the dance of archetypes in your relationships. You understand when your shadow is being triggered. You know when your inner child needs care. You trust your intuition without dismissing logic. You become someone who lives from both the head and the heart. This balance is rare, but it's also deeply magnetic. People around you begin to feel it, even if they can't explain it. They may say you've changed, or that you seem more grounded, or that you're glowing in a quiet way. That's the sign of real transformation. It doesn't shout. It moves silently, but it changes everything it touches. One of the most overlooked parts of Jung's teaching is service. He believed that individuation should not lead to selfishness, but to contribution. Once you've faced yourself, the next step is to help others face themselves. Not by preaching or fixing, but by being an example, by living with integrity, by sharing your story, by holding space for others who are still in the storm. You don't need to be a therapist or philosopher to do this. You just need to be real. Real people heal others by their presence, by their depth, by their honesty. The world needs more people who've made peace with themselves, because those people don't create chaos. They don't start wars in their homes, their communities, or their countries. They bring balance. They remind others that healing is possible, that meaning is possible, that wholeness is not a fantasy. It's a choice. Returning to the world doesn't mean forgetting your inner journey. It means living it. Every conversation, every decision, every quiet moment becomes an opportunity to act from your true center. And the beautiful thing is, this process never ends. You'll still have dreams. You'll still have moments of doubt. Symbols will still appear. Shadows will still rise. That's not failure. That's the rhythm of the soul. It expands. It contracts. It circles. It spirals. Growth is not a straight line. So we arrive at the end. Not the end of the journey, but the end of this series. A reflection, a closing of the circle, and a quiet reminder of what this all really means. Carl Jung wrote Man and His Symbols not as a textbook, but as a bridge. a bridge between your outer life and your inner world, a guide for those who feel lost in a world that rewards performance but forgets the soul, a message for those who sense something more, who dream deeply, who feel deeply, but don't know where those feelings lead. You've made it through dreams, archetypes, shadows, inner figures, descent, breakdown, rebirth, and return. And now, here's the question Jung would want you to ask. How do I live from what I've seen? Because insight means nothing without embodiment. It's not enough to understand your dreams. You must let them shape how you walk into a room, how you speak your truth, how you treat others, how you treat yourself. You also begin to serve others, not by fixing them, but by being real in front of them. You become a mirror. Your wholeness reminds others of their own potential. Your vulnerability gives them permission to feel. Your courage makes it safer for others to face themselves. You stop trying to be inspiring. You become honest instead. And strangely, that honesty inspires more than anything else. Jung believed that wholeness was a moral task, not moral in the sense of rules and judgment, but in the sense of responsibility. The responsibility to become yourself. Because when you don't, you leave a hole in the world. You deprive others of what only you could bring. Living as a symbol means accepting that your life matters. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way. It matters that you understand yourself, that you heal your patterns, that you walk with clarity. Because everything you do ripples outward. Everything you avoid becomes someone else's burden. But everything you integrate becomes someone else's inspiration. So now the work is yours. Keep tracking your dreams. Keep listening to your emotions. Keep watching for symbols. Let your unconscious be your companion, not your enemy. Let your fear become a guide. Let your sadness open your heart. Let your confusion become the beginning of clarity. Let your story become your strength. Because you are not just someone going through life. You are someone becoming whole. And that, Jung believed, is the highest purpose of any human being. Thank you for walking through this series, for showing up, for being willing to look inward. Your journey doesn't end here. It only deepens. The self is always calling. Listen closely and live accordingly. Now it's your turn. What symbol is speaking to you right now? And how will you let it shape the life you live next? Comment below and tell us. Let this be the beginning of your own living symbol. And if this journey meant something to you, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Help us bring this knowledge to more people who are ready to remember who they really are.